Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to deconstruct a classic fable to understand exactly why losing our temper causes far more problems than it solves. We're looking at the story of The Bear and the Bee. Now, on the surface, yeah, it's a simple tale about a woodland creature looking for a snack. But look a little deeper, and it perfectly maps out that complete cognitive shutdown that happens when we humans let our tempers flare. It's literally a masterclass in the anatomy of a temper tantrum, and exactly why a hot temper consistently causes way more trouble than it ever solves.
So, have you ever lashed out at a minor inconvenience only to make the whole situation 1,000 times worse? I mean, think about it. We hit a tiny roadblock, our frustration spikes, and suddenly we're reacting in ways that are just totally out of proportion to the actual problem. Psychologically speaking, this is our fight or flight response kicking into overdrive over something as trivial as a spilled cup of coffee or, a delayed email. Our rational brain just gets completely hijacked by immediate frustration. All right, let's dive into this and see exactly how this plays out for our main character, Mr. Bear. Section 1. The missing honey. Our case study begins with a simple, everyday problem. This is our baseline, folks. Every major overreaction usually starts with something incredibly mundane. For Mr. Bear, well, like all bears, he loves honey. But one day he looks in his cupboard and can't find any. He literally says, "Oh no, no honey." Now this right here is the catalyst. It's an inconvenience, sure, but look at the impulsivity. Instead of taking a deeper look around his kitchen or just pausing to think for a second, he immediately acts on that initial frustration. You see, frustration makes us seek immediate gratification instead of using critical thinking. So instead of just checking behind the flower, he sets off right into the forest. And fairly soon, he spots a beehive in a tree and smells his prize inside. Which brings us to Section 2, the initial spark. Mr. Bear doesn't hesitate for a second. He sticks his paw right into the beehive. But suddenly, a single bee flies out. The bee gives him a crystal clear warning saying, "Hey bear, go away. This is not your honey." Think of this bee as the voice of reason, right? Or that external boundary that an angry brain absolutely refuses to accept when it's hyper-focused on getting exactly what it wants. What's really interesting here is the contrast in their positions. We've got Mr. Bear who is annoyed. He feels entitled to the honey simply because he's bigger and stronger. On the flip side, we have the bee who is fast, defending its home, and actively warning the bear to back off. Notice the ego driving the bear's anger here. Hot tempers trick us into thinking we're entitled to break the rules or just ignore boundaries because we feel wronged. He completely ignores the bee's valid point. Mr. Bear actually says to the bee, "I am bigger than you, and I am stronger than you, too. I can do what I want. Now buzz off." This perfectly mirrors the irrational stuff we say when we feel entitled and slightly annoyed. Dismissing the warning entirely, he aggressively shoves his paw back into the hive. And, well, this results in a perfectly predictable consequence, a bee sting right on the nose. Ouch. Now, let's linger on this moment for a second. This minor pain is the ultimate test of emotional regulation. It's that fragile little bridge between simple frustration and full-blown destructive rage. And that sting is the turning point. We've reached Section 3, the temper tantrum. This is the exact moment where minor annoyance crosses the threshold into complete blinding rage. In adults, a temper tantrum isn't usually throwing yourself on the floor in a grocery store. It's the complete abandonment of your long-term goals just for the sake of short-term retaliation. Look at how quickly his hot temper spirals out of control in this progression. In the first few seconds, it's just annoyance at being denied the honey. Then he gets stung on the nose and growls, "Ooh, I'm so angry." But rather than retreating and reassessing the situation, he grabs a big stick and swings wildly at the fast bee. Because the bee is too fast, he misses. He swings and he swings. And think about why he gets angrier with every single miss. It's that compounding effect of failure when we're already emotionally compromised. Every single miss just fuels the fire. He yells, "Gar, gar! I will squash you! Come here!" Blinded by his bruised ego and a desperate need to win this petty little fight, he waits for the bee to fly back into the hive. When it does, he yells, "Aha, now you're trapped," and he violently smashes the hive to pieces with his stick. This is the absolute peak of the tantrum. Notice how the objective has completely shifted here? It's no longer about getting the honey. It's entirely about destroying what hurt his pride. That is exactly why hot tempers cause so much trouble. But as we know, actions driven by pure rage rarely end well. Let's look at Section 4, the painful consequences. The instant he destroys the hive and smashes it to pieces,
He crosses the point of no return. The immediate thrill of destruction suddenly gives way to the looming dread of consequences. A strange, buzzing sound begins, and it gets louder and louder and louder. Thousands. That is how many bees fly out of the smashed remains of the beehive. This is exactly why hot tempers cause trouble. They completely destroy our situational awareness. Mr. Bear was so hyper-fixated on punishing one single bee that he completely missed the massive threat of thousands of others right behind it. His hot temper blinded him to reality, and now, the entire swarm is ready to exact their revenge. So the crucial point here is the physical toll this massive overreaction takes. The swarm chases Mr. Bear through the forest, stinging him relentlessly. He takes hits absolutely everywhere. His ear, his elbow, his arms, his legs, his hands, and especially on that already injured nose. Think about the extreme pain he's experiencing right now compared to the incredibly minor initial problem of just not finding a jar of honey in his kitchen. He runs all the way home, fleeing in total defeat, and slams the door shut. Safe inside, he's left crying as he counts his many, many bee stings. You know, this is the inevitable aftermath of any tantrum. Once the adrenaline wears off, you're left with nothing but isolation, regret, and the painful cleanup of the mess you just created. This brings us to the final act, Section 5, the bitter truth. Safe inside, he hears a voice behind him. It's Mrs. Bear. She acts as the completely objective observer, assessing the situation, handing him the bee sting medicine, and calmly pointing out his recurring flaw. She says, "You did it again, didn't you? You lost your temper." To an outside observer who isn't clouded by a hot temper, our overreactions look incredibly obvious and foolish. Mr. Bear, crying and counting his stings, can only agree. And this builds to the ultimate, devastatingly practical mic drop moment of the whole story. Mrs. Bear tells him, "Also, we have honey in the cupboard. It's behind the flower." The honey was in the cupboard all along. This perfectly illustrates the tunnel vision of anger. A hot temper literally restricts our ability to see alternatives and simple solutions that are sitting right in front of us. If he hadn't let his initial frustration dictate his actions, if he had just looked a little harder, absolutely none of this would have happened. The fundamental takeaway from Mr. Bear's disastrous afternoon is crystal clear. A hot temper always gets you into trouble. It doesn't just fail to solve your original problem, it creates entirely new, far more painful problems that require even more time and energy to fix. Losing control of our emotions takes us miles away from our goals rather than helping us achieve them. If we map out this anatomy of trouble one last time, we see the clear progression. Step 1, a minor inconvenience, like thinking there's no honey. Step 2, an emotional overreaction, driven by ego and annoyance, leading to smashing the hive. And Step 3, the massive, entirely unnecessary fallout of getting chased by a bee swarm. I challenge you to think of a recent time you went from Step 1 to Step 3 unnecessarily. Because the real danger in our lives is rarely the empty cupboard, it's almost always the emotional overreaction. So, the next time you feel that initial spark of anger making you want to lash out, swing a stick, and smash a metaphorical beehive, take a breath, pause, and ask yourself, is the solution you need actually right behind the flower? Is the honey already in your cupboard? Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this helps you keep your cool the next time you face a minor inconvenience.